couple of seconds before that whole technology magic it's doing its work for live streaming. So hold on just a couple of seconds, and I think we're pretty good. So, welcome to the Master Your Exit live show powered by The Big Exit. I am Lynn, and I'll be your host for today. On this Master Your Exit live show, we bring practical insights, expert interviews, which we have, and tools to business owners like you prepare for your big exit. This live show airs every Tuesday, just like today, at 7 a.m. in Los Angeles, 10 a.m. in New York, or 3 p.m. in London, where my guest is based today as well. And we keep each show short and simple, about 30 minutes maximum. Now, if you're tuning in via our YouTube channel or our LinkedIn channel, thank you so much for joining us. If you're here in our virtual studio, that's awesome too. Feel free to use the chat function to ask all your exit related questions so we can answer them on this show or any of the future episodes. And if you're catching this episode later in a replay, well, just know that you can find all of the episodes that we have created this year on our website, thebigexit.co/master your exit shows with a little dash in between, or listen to the audio version on your favorite podcast platform. Now, in today's show, I'm super proud who's here today because I am joined by the amazing Tom Griffiths. As I said earlier on, he's a London based small business CFO. He's been adding, and I got this from his LinkedIn profile, and maybe the numbers are even more staggering now than what he had put on his LinkedIn profile. But he's been adding about more than £2 million of profits to his clients' results, and he helps business owners to turn chaos into cash and clarity. I love that. And he's on a mission to make numbers work for founders. Hi, Tom. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Lynn. Thanks very much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Amazing. You are a part-time CFO for small business owners. So my first question to you would be, or for you would be, what's like what's most often your number one priority when you're coming into these small businesses? And maybe secondly, does that number one priority change when this is a business that is looking to prepare for an exit? So two questions in one, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about that when you're being hired. What's your number one priority when you come in to support these small business owners as a CFO?
Yeah, good question. So the place I always start is what the business owner needs. So from having conversations with the business owner, I understand where they're looking to take the business and what in their mind is stopping them getting there at the moment. And usually it's some form of either profits or cash flow not being high enough. Um, they may not say it in exactly those terms, but from my side, that's what I kind of work out. And then from there, it's a case of putting in the process and the systems so that they can understand how the business is performing every month, see what's working and what's not working in the business, and make data-driven decisions to actually grow the business going forward. So in one way or another, it usually fits into that sort of mold. And then in terms of how that develops into preparing a business for sale, well, usually when I start working with a client, an exit will be on the horizon at some point. It might not be for 5 or 10 years, but that will be the end goal. And we get an understanding of what that number needs to be that they need to exit for, versus
Mhm.
what the business is worth now. And there'll usually be quite a big difference between the two. And then it's about understanding what needs to happen in the business to get us towards that end valuation. And the way we achieve those things is by generating more cash in the business and using that cash to allocate it to the right places to essentially solve the problems that we've got in the business. So if the business is dependent on the owner, then we need cash to essentially remove the business owner from the business and hire an adequate management team or whatever that might look like. That's just
Gotcha.
one example. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we could talk just about this sentence that you've said for a couple of hours, right? Because you're summarizing a lot of things into one sentence. But first of all, maybe what makes a business owner hire a fractional CFO? Because we work with a lot of small business owners as well. They often have a very slim kind of, I would call it a management team, second tier management team, but not always. Often there isn't a CFO at all. So tell me a little bit more about that, because most small business owners that I know, whether they're preparing for an exit or not at all thinking about an exit, they don't have a CFO at all. They make all the financial decisions themselves as the founder. Um, I know how I used to take financial decisions as a founder. There's a lot to be said about that as well and how that happens. But like, at what point as a business owner would I hire you as like a fractional CFO?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question. So typically I'll work with someone in doing somewhere in the range of about 2 to 15 million in
Yeah.
revenue.
Okay.
Below that point, it just depends on the sector as well and how profitable they are, and sort of what they need support with. Some businesses are a lot more straightforward to run than others. So I do have a number of clients in the construction and trade space where margins are really tight. They've got lots of money coming in and out. They're getting squeezed on price all the time. They don't know how much money they're going to make on each project or job until after the job's done. So it can be really difficult to actually manage the cash flow and the numbers with those projects. Whereas if you compare it to, say, a coach or a course creator, they might be doing the same amount of revenue, but it's actually just a lot more straightforward to run in general because you really just need an effective marketing engine and a profitable way to fulfill, once the clients come in. So it really does vary, but typically my clients are experts at what they do, but they're not numbers people. And so often looking at the numbers gets neglected or doesn't really get done. And so what ends up happening is that these nasty surprises pop up. So they might spend last year's tax bill, they might spend too much of this quarter's VAT bill, and they'll make decisions based on how much money's in the bank account and not based on how much money the business is actually making. They've all got an accountant because you need an accountant to help you file your accounts. They'll all have a bookkeeper, might be in-house, might be outsourced. And there'll just be a piece missing because the bookkeeper and the accountant are backwards looking. They help the business owner understand, well, they don't help them understand, but they paint a picture of where the business has been, but they don't help the business owner understand the numbers. So there's no one to actually sit down with the business owner and explain, this is how much money we made, this is how much cash there is in the bank, this is the difference between the two, this is how much profit we're making on each project or per customer or whichever way they look at it. And this is what we need to do, or this is what we need to focus on to improve those numbers so that we can keep the business healthy and so that we can look to improving the profits and cash flow. And that's the bit that I feel that I come in and fill. So it's forward-looking guidance. And I think every fractional CFO will do something slightly different. So fractional CFO is quite a broad term, and some fractional CFOs will actually do financial control work, or they'll do finance manager type work, or finance manager might call themselves a CFO. So I think it does depend on the specific fractional CFO that you're speaking to as to what exactly they're going to do.
I was laughing when you've mentioned like the decision-making process that a lot of business owners use when it comes to forward decision making that they need to do, which is like all the investments that you're going to make. Am I going to invest in this thing and that thing that will grow my business and whatever? And I was laughing quietly because this was the same thing that I used to do as well as a small business owner. Look at my bank account. Is the money there? Let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which got me in all kinds of situations and not necessarily great situations as well. And I think for a lot of small business owners, they will recognize that you might have an accountant. I mean, you'll probably have an accountant because you probably have one or should have one, and a bookkeeper, and that could be one and the same person, but they are not the ones that help you make those longer term strategic growth decisions that you have to make. And if you're just using literally what's on your bank account to guide that decision-making process, you're kind of steering blind because you do forget that there's still some VAT bill that needs to be paid, or a tax bill that needs to be paid, or some other thing that is not in the back of your mind when you're making that decision looking at your bank account. So that's why I had to laugh a little bit, because I think a lot of small business owners will recognize this. Like once you get to a certain stage of revenue as well as profitability, I think every small business owner needs the support of someone like you to help them make better decisions when it comes to the investments that they are making in the long run.
Yeah, and something I do regularly hear is why isn't my accountant or why isn't my bookkeeper helping me with this? Because I've got this accountant and bookkeeper and I feel like they should be helping me. And I have to explain very often that that isn't your accountant or your bookkeeper's job. So your accountant's job is to help you file your accounts and tell you how much tax you've got to pay. And your bookkeeper's job is to essentially categorize all the bank transactions that you do so that the reports are ready for the accountant. Their job is not to actually sit down with you and help you make decisions and strategize and look forward. That's a completely different function. Some of them do it or can do it. But funnily enough, one of my clients is an accountant, runs an accounting practice. So it is a different skill set. And just because someone's an accountant doesn't mean they can or should do the strategy piece.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and now we're moving a little bit towards, your role when a business is preparing for an exit, because even if the exit is only in like 3 years' time or 5 years' time, how much does the investment decision making that the owner is doing should change based upon the fact that they are looking to exit in the next couple of years? Is the decision making of the things they're investing in or should be investing in differently? And how do you help them to understand that decision making process? Would they, yeah, I'm going to wrap up that question like that.
Yeah. So I think when it comes to making decisions, I think the correct answer would be that it shouldn't change too much. But really, you're as you're working towards an exit, you need to put yourself in the buyer's shoes. What does the buyer want to see when they're acquiring a business? And it comes down to risk, that they don't want to lose their money, and they don't want to take too much risk when acquiring the business. So they need to know that when they acquire the business is going to carry on functioning in the way that they think it's going to carry on functioning. And they can't run the risk of, say, losing all the clients or losing too many clients. So if you've got one or two key clients that make up the bulk of the revenue, that's a significant risk. Um, if you've got one or two suppliers, again, that's a significant risk. If the business is dependent on the owner, significant risk. If the key relationships that exist in the business or the client relationships that exist in the business are dependent on the owner, that's a significant risk. So I think there's a shift that needs to happen in the business owner's mind, in that they need to put themselves in a potential buyer's shoes and think, would I acquire this business? And is it reasonable or realistic to think that I can achieve this valuation in the way that the business is currently operating? And if those
Mm.
things, if the answer to any of those questions is no, and I'm sure you have checklists and in-depth reviews that you go through with your clients as well, to the things to focus on, which probably align somewhat to the points that I just mentioned, then we need to solve those problems somehow. So we need to diversify the client base. We need to remove the manager from the day-to-day. We need to make sure that we've got accurate management accounts. The finances need to paint a coherent picture. The gross profit margins need to be consistent and profitable, obviously. Um, and so we need to spend some time and probably some money on fixing those problems. And so
Mm.
that's what the investment would be focused on as we near that desired exit point.
Got it. And
Do you
that's
agree?
really go ahead, sorry.
Do you agree?
Yeah, and I think it's slightly different as to where you're investing in when you're in this exiting process, even if it's still like a couple of years down the line, versus I'm not having in the back of my mind to sell my business, because I think like when you're selling the business in a couple of years' time, you will focus much more on risk reduction That's what I hear you say. Like, where are all the risks? And we're trying to remove them, and we'll keep an eye on profitability because that's what makes the business worth more. There's that part versus if you're not in that state and you're not thinking about selling yet, then probably your focus in investing will be much more on growing the business, more revenue, maybe lesser about profitability because you're thinking like I'm going to invest a big chunk of money to go after this market piece of the market, for example, or I'll be spending money to diversify my product portfolio or my services portfolio. I might be investing a lot into revenue building, which could potentially mean that my profit margins are going to be squished in that process of growth, which happens a lot because there's just so much investment that you're doing in those early stages of growing, whether that's growing into a new market or with a new service, like all of these things. And I think that really kind of sums up the core difference in thinking when you're thinking about making investments with the eye of exiting versus with the eye of scaling and growing. I see you nodding yes. Anything you want to add to that? Or
Yeah, I think I would just add that the way I always say that a business owner should look to build the business is actually the same whether they want to sell it or they want to hold on to it, because a business that somebody wants to buy, i.e. that's sellable, is actually one that's really easy to run. And so a business owner starts a business usually because they want some form of freedom, time freedom or financial freedom, whatever that might look like to them. And usually when I'm working with them, or when I start working with them, they are trapped in the business to an extent. And they want to sell the business because they want freedom. But actually,
mm,
you can still get that freedom whilst owning the business. Because if the business isn't dependent on you, then you can, and you've got the right management teams in place, and the clients aren't
you can
dependent on
do
you.
other stuff.
You can do other stuff, but you can choose how much you want to work, which is I think what most people want. It's choice and not
Yeah.
a trap. Um,
Exactly. And I think exiting should be a choice that you have, or keeping the business should also be a choice that you have, but at least feel, excited and comfortable with like, I'm no longer feeling trapped. This is what we see with the big exit as well, because sometimes people ask us, do all of your clients that go through the seven-figure exit program, do they sell their business? And I say like, yes, a lot of them do, but there's also people who fall in love with their business all over again because they've brought it to a level of freedom and opportunity and choice that they haven't experienced in a very long time with this business because they got trapped into day-to-day operations or just entangled in all the relationship building with clients and suppliers and their team and all of these things. So I think there's this when you're building towards an exit, what you're building towards is opportunity and choice and extra levels of freedom that you haven't experienced as a business owner in quite a long time.
exactly, I agree.
Yeah, so I think that's really cool, and I love how you frame that as well, because sometimes we get into the nitty-gritty details of like what makes a business valuable and what makes a business sellable and what are the right strategic decisions to make and all of these things. But in the end, what often the business owner wants is to create another level of freedom or a new level of freedom with that business. And um, I don't know if you've experienced this before. You also run a small business. I've also been in business for more than 15 years now. At some point, I think there's a few mindset shifts that happen as a small business owner. And when I started my first business, I started as a consultant freelancer, trading time for money, right? That typical like freelancer trap. And I literally felt trapped. I was like, wow, if I don't work, no money comes in. This seems really risky. If I take holiday or something like that, there's no money coming in. It's like that very early stage of being a freelancer. And I came to realize that if I wanted more freedom, I should build a business rather than be a freelancer. So that's what I started doing. And then obviously, when that business starts working and there's more clients and there's a team And there's all that management that goes with that as well. All of a sudden, you become quite trapped in that business too. You might not be trading your time for money anymore, but you're spending a lot of time doing all these managerial
Yeah.
things that come with running a business. And I think 99% of business owners get stuck there.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
get stuck until they're bored out, burned out, retirement age, and they're like, I don't want to handle this thing anymore. Just take it away from me,
Yeah.
basically. And I think there's another mindset shift to be made there is moving from being that small business owner, that entrepreneur, into what I call like an investor, looking at your business like it's an asset, just like your house is an asset or any other things that you might own that's an asset that is ideally cash flow profitable, cash flow generating asset, but really just look at it as an asset and not so much like what some business owners and maybe the clients you work with as well, they would call their business their baby, their
Yeah.
passion project, their livelihood, their like everything. And I think there comes this mindset shift. Have you seen this as well with the business owners you're working with who are not really business owners?
Yeah.
They are business slaves, if I can call it like that. Do you
Yeah.
do you see that shift happening as well with your clients when you're kind of moving into this business with them?
Yeah, so they're generally all at quite different stages. So, to think of an example, one a construction business that's doing 7 mil revenue, but broke even last year. Now that business owner is stressed, overworked, and it's very difficult for a mindset shift to happen whilst cash flow and margins are so tight.
Mm,
So there's a bit of work to do there. But if I think of another example, an FX broker in the City of London. So they're very profitable. It's two guys that run the business, and yeah, they are gearing themselves towards scaling the whole thing quickly, essentially removing as much of the day-to-day off their plate as possible, so that they can focus just on strategic ways to grow the business, and then they have a team that takes care of the actual day-to-day. So yeah, it really does depend on the stage that I first start working with them. But and again, it comes back to what the business owner actually wants. So that construction business owner, for example, he doesn't actually want to sell. He wants to do another 10 years of just running the business. And that's fine. I'm not going to tell him you need to want to sell the business. But as I said before, whether you want to sell a business or not, your life is going to get easier if we essentially build it as if we were going to one day sell it.
yes, and I think that this is the quote, I think, from this episode of the Master Your Exit show. It's like you want to run your business as if you would want to sell it one day.
Yeah.
And I think that that's where that level of freedom then comes in. And you create that extra level of freedom with the business owner, kind of slowly removing them from the business. So you generate that freedom, you create that freedom, and maybe you're never going to sell the asset because it's just a great asset to have, and you're having a lot of fun playing with it and growing it, and like doing all the things that you love doing in this business as well, right? You don't necessarily need to sell your business if you don't feel like doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Great. I feel like we could talk for many more hours,
Yeah.
Tom, and we have done a podcast before because I have been on your
Been
show
on mine. Yeah.
as well, and I had the same feeling then. I think I don't know how long we were talking then, but I felt like there was just so much to uncover and to talk about and whatever. So, but I'm keeping an eye on the time as well. We've got a couple of more minutes to go. Is there anything that you would like to share with our audience of small business owners preparing their business to exit? Anything that you would like to share with them, a little nugget of wisdom, a story of where you've worked with an owner that you found could be valuable to share with our audience as well, a golden tip you might have that you want to share, anything. The stage is yours before we wrap up the show.
Yeah, sure. So what I would say is that if you're a business owner and you don't have clarity on the numbers, you don't review the numbers every month, you don't have a simple way of kind of knowing what's working and then a way to make data-driven decisions, I would say that the best way that any business owner can just get way ahead and make significant progress there is to understand the drivers of the business. So I have a document that I can share with you. It's called the 16 Drivers of Revenue, Profit, and Cash Flow. I know 16 might sound like a lot, but when you break them down, it's not actually that complicated. But these are the 16 drivers that drive any business in the world. So JP Morgan, Google, Apple, all the way down to a one-person dental practice on a high street or a coffee shop. They're the same 16 drivers. And so the job for any business owner, and I use a washing machine analogy. So think of your business like a washing machine. All washing machines are made of the same 16 parts. Now, if the washing machine isn't working properly, if it's not washing your clothes properly, then what you need to do is you need to understand those 16 parts, find the one that's not working properly, and then fix it. And then once you fixed it, it's going to go back to washing your clothes properly. And so if we apply that same analogy to your business is made up of 16 parts. We need to find which parts of the business are not working properly or are not working in the way that they should. And then we need to focus on improving just those parts. And so
Gotcha.
what that does is it switches a business owner's attention from being stressed and overworked and trying to do everything.
All of the things. Yeah.
And usually when a business owner is struggling or a business is struggling, the solution is usually get more sales. Let's generate more sales, more sales, more sales. And actually sales often isn't the problem. Sometimes it is the problem, but often it's not. If you're generating sales and your gross profit margin is not high enough, it means that overall your net profit isn't going to be high enough or it could be negative. So you've got a margin problem, profitability problem. Or if you're
Mm,
not getting paid from your customers, you could be really profitable, really healthy gross profit, really healthy net profit. But if some of your customers don't pay, then you're going to have a significant cash flow problem if that client makes up a significant portion of your revenue. So then we've got a
mm,
cash flow problem. Or maybe all of our clients are just taking too long to pay. So what we need to do is we need to get clear on those 16 parts, um, work out which parts aren't working, and then use that information to drive decision making.
mm,
So breaking down the area that's not working into an objective for the next 30 days. And that doesn't mean we're going to magically fix the business in 30 days, but we take the part that's not working, we turn it into an objective, and we come up with three or so, three, maybe five next steps, specific next steps that the business owner is going to take to address that problem. And if we repeat that process consistently, then by definition, as long as we're setting the right next steps and the right objectives and we're completing them, then by definition, the business will start improving. And so I would say that is the best thing any business owner can do. And that's really the
makes
process that I implement with my clients.
Awesome. That's great. And I'd love to share that document or a link to the document if it's on your website or wherever in the show notes of this episode as well, so people can get it or download it, I guess, and use it as a resource to, get a little bit more clarity. And this is how I introduced you as well, turning chaos into clarity. And it sounds like this 16 puzzle pieces
Yeah.
thing, if I can call it that way, seems to be a great tool to help founders create clarity in the chaos that they might be experiencing. And that's the thing that makes them feel, like stuck and trapped in their business. So getting a bit of clarity of like, not the 100 million things that you could be doing as a business owner, because we all know that we can do 100 million things as the business owner, but like that one thing that is going to drive change towards, that freedom goal that you have, and maybe eventually being able to sell the business or create that opportunity to sell the business. So I'm happy to share your link in the show notes as well. So everyone who's watching this live or later today or at any later point in time, they can access that document and get some clarity for themselves too. So super valuable. Thank you so much. Anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up the show?
No, I think that's it. I think, like I said, if you can just implement that process, and if nothing else, just put 30 minutes in your calendar every month just to review your numbers. And if you're not already doing that, then that can put you ahead in a significant way and give you a level of clarity that you didn't know was possible.
Amazing. I love that. Absolutely. Great job. Thank you so much for being on the show. Tom, this has been insightful. It's been really great to speak to like a fractional CFO supporting small business owners on their journey. So thank you so much for being here on the show. That's a wrap for this week's episode of the Master Your Exit Live show. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you're leaving with some valuable insights to help you prepare for your big exit. Now, remember, you can catch the replay of this episode and all of the other episodes on our website at thebigexit.co/master your exit shows, or listen to the audio version on your favorite podcast platform. Now, we also love to hear from you. If you'd like to send in your exit related questions for us to be answering on next week's or any of the future episodes of this show, go ahead and surf to thebigexit.co/master your exit sign up. You can sign up there and leave your exit related questions in the form over there so we can answer them on next week's episode or any of the future episodes of this show. We'll be back next Tuesday at 7 a.m. in Los Angeles, 10 a.m. in New York, or 3 p.m. in London, where Tom is joining us from today, with more tips, with expert interviews, and with tools to help small business owners like you master your exit. Until then, keep building, keep preparing, and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for being on the show, Tom.